Look up tonight if you can. There, it hangs silent, silver, watching. The moon. It has been there every night of your life, and every night of every life before you. It watched over the first humans who ever looked up in wonder. It guided the hands of ancient stargazers, who traced its path across velvet skies. It whispered to poets, priests, and wanderers in languages we've almost forgotten. The moon is more than a satellite, more than stone and dust suspended in the void. It is humanity's oldest companion. Long before we built cities or carved symbols into clay, the moon was there steady, cyclical, unchanging. It rose and fell, waxed and waned, teaching us the very concept of rhythm, time, of return in the quiet hours when the world slows and the mind drifts. The moon becomes something more intimate. It becomes memory. It becomes dream. For thousands of years, our ancestors believed the moon shaped not just the tides, but the tides within us, the pull of emotion, the ebb and flow of intuition, the cycles of birth and renewal. Tonight, we journey backward through time, tracing the silver thread that connects us to those ancient nights. We'll walk beside civilizations that rose and fell beneath the same lunar glow. We'll listen to the rituals, the prayers, the stories they told beneath its light. And perhaps, in the stillness of this narrative, you'll feel what they felt, connection to something vast, eternal, and quietly watching over us all. Let the night settle around you. Let your breathing slow. The moon is rising, just as it always has. Imagine a world without clocks, without calendars, without the hum of electricity or the glow of screens. In that world, the night sky was not decoration, it was a necessity. It was survival. The earliest humans, those nomadic tribes who followed herds across endless plains, had no books to teach them, no maps to guide them, but they had the sky. And in the sky, the moon moved with a precision that seemed almost divine. It swelled from a sliver of silver to a radiant orb, then faded again into darkness. 12 times this happened. 12 cycles of light and shadow. And then the seasons changed, they noticed. They remembered. And slowly, across generations, they began to understand. The moon became their first calendar. Its phases marked time in a way the sun never could. The sun was constant, predictable, rising, setting, rising again. But the moon changed. It told a story every night. A crescent moon meant one thing. A full moon meant another. A new moon, when the sky was black and the stars alone held vigil, was a time of stillness, waiting, of invisible transformation. For early farmers, this knowledge was life itself. Plant during the waxing moon, when the light grows and energy rises from the earth. Harvest during the waning moon, when the sap retreats and fruits ripen. The moon didn't just mark time, it instructed. It whispered when to act and when to rest. In Polynesia, navigators stared at the moon's reflection on black ocean waters, using its position to guide canoes across thousands of miles of open sea. In the deserts of the Middle East, Bedouin travelers watched the moon to know when to move, when to stop, when water might be near. In the forests of northern Europe, tribes gathered beneath full moons to celebrate, to mourn, to make decisions that would shape their survival. They didn't see the moon as a dead rock. They saw it as a presence, a witness, a guide. And in the quiet moments, when the fire burned low and the stars wheeled overhead, they felt something stirring in their chests, a sense that the moon was not just above them, but somehow with them. What were they beginning to sense, those ancient observers? What would they come to believe about this glowing companion that never left the sky? In the land between two rivers, where the Tigris and Euphrates carved green life through arid plains, the moon found its first priests: Mesopotamia, Sumer, Babylon. Akkadies were the cradles of civilization, and they were also the birthplaces of something deeper, something that would ripple through history for millennia. Lunar astrology. The Sumerians called the moon Nana, later known as Sign in Akkadian. He was not just a god, he was the god. The father of the sun, the keeper of time, the ruler of wisdom and mystery. Temples rose in his honor, ziggurats of mud brick that climb toward the heavens, their shadows stretching long under moonlight. In the city of your priests climbed those ziggurat steps every night. They carried tablets of clay, reeds for writing, and eyes trained to see what others missed. They watched the moon's position against the backdrop of stars. They measured its brightness, its color, its angle. They noted when it appeared near certain constellations: the bull, the scorpion, the twins. They recorded eclipses with reverent terror. For when the moon darkened, the gods were speaking. These weren't idle observations. This was science, and it was also divination, because the Babylonians believed the heavens and the earth were mirrors. What happened above would happen below. A full moon near Mars meant war. A new moon aligned with Venus whispered of love or treachery. An eclipse, an omen so powerful that kings would step down from their thrones temporarily, placing a substitute ruler in their place, just in case the gods demanded a sacrifice. Lunar astrology became a language of power, a way to speak with fate. Priests didn't just watch the moon, they translated its movements into prophecy, into guidance, into law. The moon's cycles dictated when crops were planted, when battles were waged, when treaties were signed. It governed the rhythms of empire and in the quiet of night. When rituals were performed in torchlit chambers deep within those ziggurats, the priests would chant. They would pour libations of milk and honey. They would offer incense that spiraled upward, as if carrying prayers directly to Nana's silver throne. They believed that the moon was alive, conscious, watching, and they were right. At least, they were right about one thing. The moon was watching. It always had been. But what about Egypt? What about the land where death and rebirth were woven into every stone? Along the Nile, under skies so vast they seemed to swallow the soul, the Egyptians built a civilization obsessed with eternity. And in that obsession, the moon found its place, not as king, but as keeper. Keeper of time, keeper of magic, keeper of the threshold between worlds. The Egyptians had many gods of the moon, but two rose above the rest: Khonsu and Thoth. Khonsu, whose name means traveler, was depicted as a young man wrapped in the bandages of a mummy. Crowned with the crescent and full moon, he traveled across the night sky, a wandering god who brought healing and protection. When the moon was bright, Khonsu was near. When it vanished, he walked through darker realms, places where only gods could tread. Thoth was older, wiser. He was the ibis-headed scribe, the god of writing, mathematics, and magic. The Egyptians believed Thoth used the moon to measure time itself. Each lunar cycle was a chapter in the great book of existence. Thoth recorded everything: the deeds of the living, the weight of the soul, the balance of Mat, the cosmic order. In temples along the Nile, priests performed rituals synchronized with the moon's phases. During the new moon, when darkness reigned, they honored the dead. They believed the veil between life and the afterlife was thinnest then, and spirits could cross more easily. Offerings of bread, beer, and incense were laid at altars. Hymns were sung in low, resonant voices that echoed through stone corridors. When the full moon rose, the rituals changed. Now was the time of celebration, of abundance, of invoking the moon's power to heal the sick and protect the vulnerable. Priests would lead processions down to the river's edge, where the moon's reflection shimmered on the water. They would chant, and the people would gather. And together they would watch the light dance on the surface, believing in that moment that the divine was touching the earth. The Egyptians also used the moon to regulate their calendar. While the sun marked the solar year, the moon governed the sacred festivals. The festival of the new moon, the festival of the full moon, the Wepatrinpet. The opening of the year was tied to the heliacal rising of Sirius, but lunar cycles determined the rhythm of the agricultural and religious calendar. In quiet tombs, painted on walls that would remain hidden for thousands of years, the moon appeared again and again. Crescent moons cradling stars, full moons illuminating the journey of the soul through the duat, the underworld. The moon was not just a timekeeper, it was a guide, a light in the darkness, a promise that even in death, cycles continued, that renewal was always coming, and as the desert winds whispered over sand and stone, The moon watched, silent, patient, eternal, but far to the west. In the hills and islands of Greece, a different kind of wisdom was stirring. One that would ask not just what the moon was, but why. The Greeks did not simply worship the moon, they wondered about it in their myths. The moon was Selene, a titaness who drove a silver chariot across the night sky, her robes trailing starlight. She was beautiful, distant, and tragic. The most famous story told of her love for Endymion, a mortal shepherd. Selene was so enchanted by him that she asked Zeus to grant him eternal sleep, so he would never age, never die, and she could visit him every night in his dreams. It was a love frozen in time, like the moon itself, always present, always unreachable. There was also Artemis, the virgin goddess of the hunt, often conflated with lunar symbolism. She roamed the forests by moonlight, fierce and independent, a protector of women and wild things. The moon became associated with feminine power, intuition, and the untamed. But the Greeks didn't stop at stories. They asked questions. Pythagoras, the mathematician and mystic, believed the moon and all celestial bodies produced music as they moved through the heavens. The music of the spheres, he called it. A harmony beyond human hearing, but fundamental to the structure of reality. The moon's song was part of that cosmic symphony. Aristotle observed the moon's phases and theorized about its relationship to the earth. He believed that the moon existed in a realm between the perfect, unchanging heavens and the chaotic, mortal world below. It was a bridge, a mediator. And he wondered, did the moon influence not just tides but the human body? The balance of humors, the temperament of the soul. Greek physicians began to associate the moon with health and illness. The word lunacy would later derive from luna, the Latin word for moon, reflecting an ancient belief that the moon's phases could disturb the mind. Full moons, they thought, could bring madness, fever, or erratic behavior. This wasn't superstition. This was early psychology, an attempt to map the invisible forces acting on the human psyche. In temples dedicated to Selene and Artemis, priestesses performed rituals by moonlight. They chanted, danced, and entered trance states, believing the moon opened doorways to prophecy and insight. These weren't wild celebrations, they were disciplined. Meditative practices designed to align the mind with lunar rhythms. The Greeks were beginning to see the moon not just as a light in the sky, but as a reflection of something within, a mirror of emotion, a symbol of change, of cycles, of the hidden tides that move beneath consciousness. And as Greek philosophy spread eastward and westward, these ideas traveled with it. But in the Far East, another civilization had been watching the moon for just as long. They had their own profound understanding. In ancient China, the moon was not separate from life, it was life. The Chinese saw the universe as a dance of opposites, yin and yang, light and dark, sun and moon, masculine and feminine. The sun was young bright, active outward. The moon was yin soft, receptive, inward. Neither was superior. Both were necessary. Balance was everything. The moon governed the lunar calendar, which dictated nearly every aspect of Chinese life. Months began with the new moon. Festivals aligned with the full moon. The harvest, the planting, the honoring of ancestors all followed lunar time. The most beloved of all Chinese festivals was the Mid-Autumn Festival. Celebrated on the 15th day of the 8th lunar month, the night of the fullest, brightest moon of the year. Families would gather beneath the moon's glow, sharing mooncakes filled with sweet lotus paste, their tops stamped with symbols of unity and prosperity. Lanterns glowed in gardens and along rivers. Children carried paper lanterns shaped like rabbits, for legend said a jade rabbit lived on the moon. Pounding the elixir of immortality in a mortar, there was a story the Chinese told, a story every child knew. It was the tale of change, the moon goddess. She had been mortal once, married to a skilled archer named Hu Yi. When Hu Yi obtained the elixir of immortality, Change drank it to keep it from falling into the wrong hands, and she floated up to the moon, where she lived forever in a palace of silver and jade, accompanied only by the rabbit, Her story was one of sacrifice, separation, and longing. And on the night of the Medittive festival, people gazed at the moon and thought of those they loved but could not reach. The moon became a symbol of reunion because no matter how far apart people were, they could all look up and see the same moon in Japan. The tradition of Tsukimi moon viewing was practiced with quiet reverence. People would sit in gardens, arranging offerings of rice, dumplings, and autumn grasses, simply watching the moon rise. It was meditation. It was art. It was a moment to pause and appreciate beauty, impermanence, and the turning of seasons. In Korea, Chuseok, the Harvest Moon Festival, was a time to honor ancestors, to give thanks, and to celebrate abundance. The full moon was a symbol of completeness, of family wholeness, of gratitude across the Far East. The moon was not feared or worshipped with trembling, it was cherished. It was the quiet companion, the gentle light, the reminder that all things move in cycles, that darkness always returns to light, that separation always carries the hope of reunion. And as the moon rose over rice fields and mountain temples, its light touched every face the same way, softly, without judgment, without haste. But the moon's influence was not limited to great empires. In forests, deserts, islands, and plains across the world, indigenous peoples had woven the moon into their very survival. There were no books in these traditions, no temples of stone, but there was knowing deep, embodied, passed down through generations in story, song, silent observation. The Native American tribes of North America named each full moon according to the season it marked. The wolf moon of January, when wolves howled in hunger. The strawberry moon of June, when berries ripened. The harvest moon of September, when fields were gathered under its bright glow. These weren't poetic names, they were calendars. They told people what to do, when to do it, how to survive. The Ojibwe people spoke of Grandmother Moon, a protector and guide. She watched over women, governed their cycles, and taught the rhythms of life. Ceremonies were held during the full moon, when her power was strongest. Drums echoed. Tobacco was offered. Prayers were sung. In the Pacific, Polynesian navigators used the moon to cross oceans. They read its phases, its position relative to stars, the way its light touched the water. The moon told them which way to sail, when storms were coming, where islands lay beyond the horizon. This wasn't mysticism, it was science woven with reverence. In Africa, the Dogon people of Mali tracked lunar cycles with extraordinary precision. They timed planting and rituals to the moon, believing it carried the life force of their ancestors. The moon was not separate from the people, it was their elder, their teacher. Australian Aboriginal cultures saw the moon as a trickster, a storyteller, a keeper of law. Dreamtime stories connected the moon to creation, to the movement of animals, to the changing of seasons. Ceremonies were held under moonlight, where initiates learned sacred knowledge. Where dances connected the living to the eternal, these cultures understood something modern life often forgets. The moon is not just a passive object. It is an active presence in the rhythms of life. It influences migration patterns of animals, the spawning of fish, the blooming of night flowers. It affects tides. Yes, but also the subtle tides within all living things. Indigenous peoples didn't need to prove this scientifically. They felt it. They lived it. And they honored it, not with grand monuments, but with attention. With gratitude, with respect. The moon, to them, was family. And in rituals performed for thousands of years beneath its light, they remembered, we are not separate from the cosmos. We are part of it. We move with it. We breathe with it. The moon was not above them, it was among them. Across every culture, across every age, certain patterns emerged. The moon spoke a universal language, and humanity learned to listen. The full moon was power. It was the peak, the climax, the moment when energy reached its zenith. Rituals performed under the full moon were rituals of manifestation, of celebration, of calling forth. Fires were lit, drums were beaten, voices rose in chant and song. The full moon was a time to gather, to be seen. to let intention radiate outward like light. The new moon, by contrast, was stillness, darkness, the hidden seed. When the moon disappeared from the sky, people turned inward. This was a time for reflection, for release, for planting intentions that would grow in silence before emerging into light. Offerings were whispered, candles were lit in solitude. The new moon was not absence, it was potential. Eclipses were different. They were ruptures. Moments when the natural order paused, when the veil between worlds thinned, when the gods themselves seemed to hold their breath. Eclipses were feared, revered, and ritualized with intensity. In some cultures, people made noise drums, shouts, clanging pots to scare away whatever force was devouring the moon. In others, they sat in silence, believing the eclipse was a sacred mystery, not meant to be disturbed. Water was central to lunar rituals everywhere. The moon governed the tides, and so it was believed to govern all water, including the water within the body. Ritual baths under moonlight. Blessed water collected during the full moon, rivers and lakes where moonlight touched the surface, considered holy fire too. The interplay of flame and lunar glow created a liminal space, a threshold where prayers could be heard and spirits could move. Incense rose, torches flickered, and in the smoke and silver light, people felt something shift. These were not empty gestures. These were technologies of connection, ways to align human intention with cosmic rhythm. And whether performed in a Babylonian ziggurat, an Egyptian temple, a Greek grove, a Chinese garden, or beneath open skies with no shelter but stars, the rituals carried the same truth. The moon was a mirror, and what it reflected was the soul. Perhaps this was always the deepest truth. The moon did not stay the same. It changed. Every night it was different, waning, disappearing, returning. Just like us, ancient peoples saw themselves in the moon's cycles. They saw birth in the crescent, growth in the waxing light, fullness in the bright circle, decline in the waning, death in the darkness, and then, always, the return. The moon taught them that nothing is permanent, that everything moves, that endings are not final. It taught them that emotions like tides rise and fall, that moods shift, thoughts change, energy flows and ebbs. To fight this was to fight nature itself. But to move with it, to honor the times of brightness and the times of shadow, was to live in harmony. The moon became a symbol of intuition, of dreams, of the unconscious mind. It ruled the night, and the night was when the rational world softened. When imagination came alive, when the hidden parts of the self emerged, women especially were linked to the moon, their bodies moving in lunar rhythm. Menstrual cycles averaged 29 days, the same as a lunar month. Fertility, birth, and the mysteries of creation were woven into lunar symbolism. The moon was mother, maiden, crone, life, death, rebirth. But the moon belonged to everyone. It was the inner voice, the quiet knowing, the part of us that feels before it thinks, that senses before it sees. In meditation, mystics gazed at the moon to calm the mind. In prayer, seekers called upon lunar energy to guide them through darkness. In art, poets and painters used the moon as metaphor for longing, for beauty, for the unreachable and eternal. The moon was a mirror not of what we are, but of what we feel. And in its silver light, humanity learned to see itself. Thousands of years have passed. Civilizations have risen and fallen. We have walked on the moon, touched its dust, analyzed its rocks. We know it is not a god. We know it is stone in silence, and yet we still look up. We still feel something. Modern astrology continues the Babylonian tradition. Reading the moon's position to understand emotion, instinct, and inner life. The moon sign, astrologers say, reveals what we need to feel safe, loved. Meditation practices align with lunar phases. New moon intentions. Full moon releases. Lunar yoga. Moon circles. These are not ancient relics. They are living traditions, adapted, reimagined, but rooted in the same truth the ancients knew. People still gather under full moons. They still set intentions under new moons. They still feel something shift when the moon is bright, or when it vanishes from the sky. Science has given us answers, but it has not erased the feeling, the sense that the moon is more than what it seems, that it touches something in us that reason cannot reach. And maybe that's enough. Maybe the mystery is the point. The moon is rising again tonight. Just as it rose last night. Just as it will rise tomorrow, it rises over cities and forests, oceans and deserts, for people who know its names, and people who have forgotten. It rises over you wherever you are. As you listen to these words, the moon has not changed. It is the same moon that watched over Sumerian priests, Egyptian scribes, Greek philosophers, Chinese poets, indigenous elders. The same moon that guided ships, marked seasons, inspired rituals, and reflected the human soul. We have changed. Our languages, our tools, our understanding. But the moon? The moon remains. And perhaps that is its greatest gift. In a world of constant motion, of noise and hurry and forgetting, the moon is still, steady. Returning, it reminds us that we are part of something larger, something older, something that will continue long after we are gone. So tonight, if you can, look up. Let the moon's light touch your face. Feel the quiet, the calm, the connection to every person who ever stood beneath that same glow and wondered. The moon is watching. It always has been, and in its light, we are never truly alone.